Hey everyone, I'm John. Welcome back to my channel. This is episode 6 of my series where I'm reading The Value of Freedom. It's a draft, fully costed fiscal plan for an independent Alberta. And if you're interested in the issue of Alberta independence, either for or against it, I suppose, this document's worth checking out because this is the plan that's put forth. It's a draft plan that's put forth by the Alberta Prosperity Project. I recommend you go back and watch all these videos in order because I'm basically just reading through the document section by section. And so the first video I read the introduction and the overview, and then the executive summary. The second video I read the section about revenue available to independent Alberta, and the argument is that we're going to have like $40 to $50 billion net if we separate from Canada. And it's a really persuasive argument because even if we're off, as this document admits, plus or minus 10%, we're clearly going to be ahead. So it's not even an argument when people tell you that that Alberta is going to be broke when we leave. We're going to be so far well off. And that's basically what this document's outlining. There was a section about the Canada Pension Plan. Go check out that video. I think you'll find it interesting. There's another section about RCMP and policing. And then there was one about just some specific federal services where they analyzed Indigenous services, federal regulatory and licensing, Canada Post, etc. You can see it all here. So go back and check out those previous videos. And in this video, I'm going over this section. Oops, I went too far. This section, I went really too far. It's an overview of an integrated independent Alberta, the financial landscape. Okay, so this analysis integrates a fiscal landscape of an independent Alberta, incorporating both the replacement of federal services and Alberta's existing provincial budget, expenditures, and taxation. This analysis estimates the total available federal taxes retained plus provincial taxes, total expenditures, federal services plus provincial spending, and the resulting fiscal balance. An underlying assumption in these calculations is that in recognition of the need to ensure long-term fiscal responsibility for an independent Alberta government, using spending limits and controls will be embedded into the Alberta Constitution, including. Now right there, I'm really happy that they're pointing this out, right? Because there's a lot of talk about having our new Constitution where spending limits are like written right into it. So there's no way that governments can just explode the debt. And, you know, I try not to follow federal politics too much these days. I'm just so focused on Alberta independence. But I'm hearing that the latest budget for Canada was like proposed to be $40 billion overspent. And now it's going to be like $80 billion. And like in one of my previous videos, some of those ladies in Stettler at the office, they were saying, hey, we're saddling up future generations with debt. So like that was one of her main concerns. And I'm glad that the Alberta Prosperity Project is talking about spending limits being written into our Constitution. Like, yes, okay, we need to live within our means. And Alberta is going to have a lot of means, but it's not infinite, obviously. So balanced budget requirement. Mandate that the government maintain a balanced budget over a defined economic cycle, 4 to 5 years, allowing deficits during economic downturns, but requiring repayment within a set time frame. And so, like, here's the thing. Deficits, they're not always bad, right? If there is an economic downturn, the government can spend a little bit of money and take on some debt and, encourage the economy to go forward. And that is kind of the standard way that this works. And I would add to this and say that if the debt's being taken on for things like critical infrastructure, right? Like, okay, the private sector's down because of some global economic downturn, then it absolutely makes sense to me that now is the time to build, right? Like we could build infrastructure that we need, and it's okay to, finance that kind of stuff because it's financed over its useful life so that future generations who are still paying that debt are actually the ones who are using the thing as well. So to me, I think that it makes sense to allow for this. Include exceptions for emergencies, natural disasters, economic crisis. Got to be careful with this, right? Too many exceptions, then we don't really have a rule. With strict criteria for legislative approval, supermajority vote. Okay. So basically, a supermajority could override the Constitution, I guess. Debt limits. Cap total public debt as a percentage of GDP, 20 to 30% to prevent unsustainable borrowing. Like right now, Canada's debt to GDP, the last time I checked, like we're over 100%. And like just what that means, like the whole economy of Canada, if it was just all paid towards the debt, we would have to work more than an entire year just to pay 100% of everything to pay off the debt. And generally speaking, when a country gets over 100%, that's really bad. Like there's some exceptions like Japan and stuff like that. And I know a lot of countries around the world are starting to push this. So this is the global trend. But, when the debt gets out of control, you get economic downturns and, you get austerity measures and stuff like that. So you got to live within your means. Transparency and reporting. Require the government to publish quarterly, audited, detailed, easy to understand budget reports, including revenue sources, expenditures, and long-term fiscal projections. Yes. Okay. Why isn't this common sense? I'll push back a little bit and say like quarterly audited. From an accounting perspective, that's a lot of auditing. It's good to audit, but that would be expensive. Maybe yearly might be all that we need. Just a food for thought. Spending oversight. Require legislative supermajority, 2/3 approval for a significant spending increase on new programs exceeding the set percentage of the budget. Okay, so what that'll do is that'll put pressure on politicians where they can't just, promise a whole bunch of things just to get elected. Like that seems to be what happens in Canada and so many countries. It's like, we're going to give you the moon. Just vote for us. And then they get in, and then what do we get? Just like saddled with generational debt. Prohibit off-budget spending or hidden liabilities. Unfunded pension obligations. So there's a big one, right? Our pension in Canada is an unfunded liability. Okay? What that means is that the current obligations that the pension has to pay out, there's not enough money right now to pay for it. So the whole pension system that Canada has is dependent on future generations paying more into it. And look, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be really risky, especially when you start to have a situation like Canada's facing where there's fewer young people paying into the pension and more older people taking out, right? Because it kind of reverses the pyramid where, then it becomes unsustainable. Ideally, you want to have more young people paying in and fewer older people taking out. So unfunded liabilities are a huge risk, to a government. Require taxpayer approval for any budget which imposes additional taxes. Can you imagine that? Right? Like, oh, they want to put a carbon tax on us. Oh, wait, we have to vote on it. They want to, create a new tax on some item. We got to vote on that. I think that's a great idea, right? Because in democracy, the whole idea is like you pay your taxes and you faithfully do this. You expect to see something good out of it. But if you're just told to pay the taxes, then it starts to feel more like theft and less like, hey, I'm just being a good citizen paying into my share, of the country that I'm enjoying. Taxation principle. Enshrine a commitment to low, simple, and transparent taxation, requiring any new taxes or tax rate increases to be approved by a referendum. Like, I like low taxes. I like simple to understand taxes too. So I have a degree in accounting and economics, and I know a little bit about this topic. And I've come to the opinion after getting my degree that the only reason accountants really exist is because our tax system is overly convoluted. Honestly, I mean that, okay? how complicated is it really? Here's the money you get. Here's the money you spent, right? Revenue in, expenses out, and then a percent for taxes. And like anybody should be able to figure that out, except that we have like a tax code this thick. Actually, I got a copy of it back here somewhere. I just saw it. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, right here. If you don't believe me. Yeah. This is the book I studied in university. Okay. So, I know a few things about this. Anyway, resource revenue management. Establish a constitutionally protected sovereign wealth fund with clear rules for fund contributions to save a portion of resource revenues for future generations. Yes. Okay. Like what an amazing gift to save money for future generations. I think like as a parent, I would love to just pass on my wealth to my kids. Well, why can't we have that mentality as a country? You know, where instead the way we're doing it is so backwards. We're passing on debt to future generations. And a sovereign wealth fund, like some countries have that. And like it gets to the point where you can just live off the interest, you know, and then eventually you can have like lots of social programs that everybody loves, you know, like then it's actually kind of like free stuff, or really it's like, you know, you lent your sovereign wealth fund out to other businesses or whatever that are benefiting from it. They're paying the interest, and then that's paying for your social programs, and the thing still grows. Like, if Alberta had started a sovereign wealth fund, like a true, and we'd like really committed to saving into it, we could have like $1 trillion in there right now. If my parents' generation had done that, and I think they tried, but like, yeah, anyway, require mandatory regular royalty rate review to assess necessary adjustments, royalties based on results and on projections. Highly desirable is to define a royalty mechanism formula to moderate downturns or capitalize on windfall profits to allow Albertans to share in windfall profits in cases of energy price increases and reduce royalties to ensure the resource industry remains viable in downturns. So if I'm reading that right, they're projecting, or they're saying that, hey, if the price of oil like spikes dramatically and, you know, for a sustained period of time, I guess, then maybe regular Albertans will just get a paycheck. Wouldn't that be nice, hey? Like the government's kind of paying us. But no, to be fair, it's coming from energy companies. But I mean, if the price is increasing, they budgeted everything off of a certain price. So it's, look, I'm not in favor of necessarily just raising taxes on big companies. But, you know, there's something to this, right? I kind of believe, though, that if companies are taking the risks, they should also take the rewards. So I'm not necessarily in favor of just, you know, increasing or decreasing royalties unpredictably, but it is an idea, right? Long-term fiscal planning. Mandate multi-year fiscal frameworks, 10-year plans to ensure sustainability and alignment with economic and demographic trends. Hey, let's run our country like a business. You know, tons of businesses have like 1-year plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans, you know, for what they want to accomplish. And I think this would probably break us out of the cycle that we're constantly in with like politicians being on like a 3 to 5 year time frame where they can't see past that because it's the next election cycle. So the first year they get in, they do a bunch of stuff, and then they sit there for 2 or 3 years. The next election cycle comes around, they promise us the moon. And, you know, but I like having like 10-year plans. I don't know how that would work, though, in a sense, because, you know, presumably we'd still have like 4 or 5 year election cycles. And so maybe, you know, a future government would get in and then they'd change the plan. So maybe there'd have to be some sort of like mechanism to lock it in, where even if the government that's currently in gets voted out. But then again, I kind of want that, right? Because what if it's a bad plan and we just want to like scrap it, but now we can't because we're stuck with it. Imagine if Rachel Notley locked us in on a 10-year plan and then Daniel Smith had to wait like 6 years to be able to change something. Interesting thing to think about, hey? Requires stress testing of budget resilience against potential economic shocks, commodity price drops. So I wonder how you'd stress test a budget. So you got to forgive me there on this one. I'm not quite sure what kind of testing that one means. Like what do we just like project that if things go down, like we have like a high, low, and a medium forecast, and then we maybe base our budget off of kind of like a low to medium forecast, and then if it's a really good one, then we're like, okay, we're going to be all right. Give us a dividend or something. Ensure amendments to fiscal rules require broad consensus, public referendum to prevent political manipulation. Okay. Key assumptions. Federal tax contributions 21 to 24. Alberta's federal tax contributions are estimated at 68 to 75 billion annually, with 22 points to 26 billion returned in transfers, yielding an over contribution of 46 to 49 billion dollars. So like that argument was made in the second video where they laid that out. Components, so personal income tax is 30 to 37, 35 to 37. Corporate income tax is 10 to 11. Goods and sales, GST, 9 billion. Excise taxes, 2 to 2.7 to 2.8 billion. EICPP, 15 to 17 billion. So like what they're saying here is they're not changing anything, right? We're just going to continue on with our tax regime. Like day one, we take over, nothing changes. And I like that because we don't want to just say, hey, we're going to come in and the very next day change everything. Like the day after independence, we want things to pretty much just stay the same so that we can start making plans and changing things in an orderly fashion. An independent Alberta would retain a full 68 to 75 billion, replacing federal transfers with its own services. Like I heard this argument on X where people were saying, oh, what about the 20 to 30 billion dollars that the federal government sends us? Well, yeah, okay, but we send them 68 to 75 billion, right? And that's where you get that 46 to 49, like just rough numbers here, guys. Federal services cost estimated at 22.7 to 31.6 billion annually, with a 2.8 to 5.7 billion in initial setup costs one time based on prior table. So yeah, they have these initial setup costs that I have no idea how they came up with that. I'm assuming it's just an educated guess. National defense 3 to 5 billion, 1.2 billion to setup. International relations 0.5 to 1 billion annually, 0.2 to 0.3 billion setup. Health programs 8 to 10 billion. So this is actually repeating the stuff from the second video that I made. This is the same table that's at the top. I'm recognizing all these numbers, so I'm not going to read them word for word. You can see them here on the screen. I basically covered them in the first couple videos. But it lays out all the expenses that we currently have, and it says that we're taking the overall federal budget, and then we're factoring out our potential, like our share of the revenue, and then that reason that same scale to like kind of factor out our expenses. So it's like 13 to 15% of the overall federal expense is what we're considering to be ours, which I think is a fair methodology. Alberta's provincial budget 25 to 26, revenue 74.1 billion, including 17.1 billion from non-renewable resources. Okay, I always wondered that. So like, here's my take on this. The thing with royalties, you really don't want to balance your budget or base your budget off of royalties, in my opinion, because it's a one-time payment. Like once you sell the oil, you don't have it again. And the problem is that it's not the most stable form of taxation in a sense, right? It's better to have something maybe more, I hate to say it, but like a sales tax or an income tax. And then royalties should maybe all go into the sovereign wealth fund. And then at some point, the interest that's generated from the sovereign wealth fund would then be used as a form of of balance paying for your budget, source of revenue. I mean, and so this is the problem that Alberta has, right? When the price of oil goes up, this number here, this 17.1 billion, that goes up. And when the price of oil goes down, then it goes down. And so like now that the price of oil is so high, Alberta might actually be able to balance its budget, right? So anyway, $123 million increase in education property taxes and a new 8% personal income tax bracket for income up to $60,000 effective January 1st, 2025, but without the $4 billion disaster contingency funding. Sorry guys, I'm not too familiar with the Alberta budget, so I can't really speak to any of these numbers. Expenditures, $75 billion, 73, okay, including $2.6 billion for schools, $1.1 billion for family, social supports, housing, $2.5 billion for roads and bridges. Deficit, $1.2 billion per the Fraser Institute to $5.2 billion per RBC, Scotiabank, and EY, reflecting conservative revenue projections and spending increases. So these numbers were all put out before the war in Iran started and before the whole increase in oil happened. So our deficit, like we might actually balance our budget this year because of the price in oil. We'll see how this works. Governments probably just find more ways to borrow money. Debt. Alberta's provincial debt is $78.4 billion in 2023, with interest costs included in expenditures. Alberta pension plan, using the very conservative case of $167 billion CPP asset transfer, half of Alberta's $334 billion actually owed. The APP base in 2025 is $183.7 billion, generating $23.4 billion annually, $18.4 billion investment returns at 10% plus $5 billion in contributions. Just so you know, guys, the video that I made about this is a middle number. So what they did is they took the low and the high for what we think is our share of the Alberta pension plan, like what Canada is telling us is our share and what we're saying is actually our share. And this is right in the middle. Canada says we deserve like $100 billion of it. And so I would have preferred to base all of this off of just what Canada says, not because I want to concede it, but because I just don't want to be optimistic at all with any of these. I just want to be like as conservative in these estimates as we possibly can to show, and I think it would make a stronger case, because even if you go with the worst case scenario, if we're still way better off, you know. This covers a $3 to $6 billion annual CPP cost with surplus revenue, reducing the need for new contributions. Needless to say, if Alberta receives the full funding as laid out in LifeWorks report, $3 to $34 billion, these numbers would roughly double. And that's like the point here, right? Is even if we went with the $100 billion, you know, and we landed somewhere in the middle, well, then our projections were just under, and we're better off for it. It's just, I think, a stronger argument to go with the lowest, most conservative, worst case scenario, in my humble opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Limitations. Federal tax contribution estimates are approximate. Provincial budget figures are from 25 to 26 projections, subject to change based on economic conditions, oil prices. Setup costs for federal services are one time but may spread over years, impacting initial budgets. Total revenue for an independent Alberta. An independent Alberta would retain both federal and provincial revenues. Federal taxes retained, $68 to $75 billion annually. Personal income tax, corporate income tax, GST, excise tax, the ICPP. Provincial revenues, $74.1 billion, 25 to 26, including non-renewable resources, $17 billion. Education property taxes, including the projected $123 million increase. So they're not changing anything. They're just going with what our current situation is. Personal income tax with a new 8% tax income tax bracket for up to $60,000, reducing revenue slightly but offset by the taxes. Alberta pension plan revenue, $23.4 billion, $18.4 billion returns, $5 billion contributions, with contributions already in federal provincial totals. The total revenue, excluding Alberta pension plan overlap, $68 to $75 billion, federal $74.1 billion, provincial 142 to 149 billion annually. Note, the $5 billion Alberta pension plan contributions are included in the $5 to $9 billion EICPP federal estimate, so not double counted. Good. Surplus from APP. The 23.37 billion APP revenue covers the $3 to $6 billion pension costs, leaving a potential surplus of $17 to $20 billion for other uses, reducing contribution rates, enhancing benefits. So that was the big argument in the video that I made about the pension, is that we could do probably a little bit of both, give more benefits to people collecting the pension and reduce the rates for people paying into it and still be better off. Like, they laid out all the math. Go check out that previous video. Total expenses for an independent Alberta. Expenditures include current provincial spending plus the cost of replacing federal services. Provincial expenditures, $75.3 billion, covering healthcare, education, infrastructure, and total services. Federal services replacement, $22 to $32 billion annually, including national defense. These are all the same numbers. International relations, health programs, okay. So these are all the same numbers as before. Total annual expenditures, $75.3 billion plus $17.1 billion to $30 billion federal services. Puts us at around $98 to $107 billion in expenditures. Setup costs, $2.8 to $5.8 billion. Again, I don't know how they're calculating that, but assumed as a one-time expense in the first year or amortized over several years, $1 to $2 billion annually over 3 years. The author's note, based on experience in large-scale information technology projects, there are considerable improvements which can be achieved using modern systems. AI where appropriate, and streamlining and simplifying processes and regulations also will be simplified. Estimates of cost improvements are not included in this document, but experience suggests cost reductions as high as 50% are plausible. And I think that's really like what Albertans want to hear, is we're not just going to turn Alberta, the Republic of Alberta, into a little mini Canada where we just continue on blasting through money like there's no end, and then just because we have it or just because we can borrow it. There is a serious desire in this movement to see fiscal responsibility. We want to see expenses going down. We don't want to see wasteful money, wasteful spending on stupid things. And there's so much of it. Like, every time I listen to the news, it's like, oh, my money. I was listening to YouTube and I got like 6 ads from the government of Canada. One was telling me about like how to wash my food, and it was like showing like washing your hands. I'm like, really? The government is paying YouTube to advertise to me that I need to wash my hands when I'm cooking food. Like, come on. Like, we can cut so much. Okay, there's so much fat to trim. Anyway, fiscal balance. Revenue, 142 to 149 billion. Expenditures ongoing, 91 to 105 billion. Surplus, excluding setup, 29.4 to 48 billion. Okay, surplus with setup taken entirely in at first, 23 to 45 billion. APP surplus, 17.4 to 20.4 billion, potentially reducing contribution rates. So basically it's saying that, this is why I'm a little bit confused here, because up ahead in the second video, it was like 40 to 50 billion is what our net would be. And now it's saying that it's 30 to 50 billion. So where'd the 10 billion go? Am I just reading this wrong? I don't know. I'm trying my best here, guys. I'm trying my best. I'm not an expert at reading this stuff. I'm just trying. Comparison to current fiscal position. Current provincial budget, 2025-2026. Revenue, 74.1 billion. Expenditures of 75.3 billion, and a deficit of 1.2 to 5.2 billion. So it's not even changing any of this. This is our current situation. Current federal contributions. Alberta, 68 to 75 billion in federal tax yields a net loss of 44 to 47 billion after 22. So that's a net loss that we're just sending money out. Okay, so now it's going to explain a little better. Independence impact. Retaining 68 to 75 billion in federal tax estimates, the 44 to 47 billion net loss covers federal services, 16.4 to 29.5 billion. So I guess there's quite a spread in our federal services. So that might account for a little bit of this. Combined with provincial revenue creates a significant surplus, 26.3 to 44.3 billion, even with setup costs. Okay, they're adding in the setup costs. That's what it is. Compared to the current 1.2 to 5.2 billion dollar deficit. So it's like day one, we changed nothing. We're 26 to 44.3 billion dollars ahead. Right now, we're 1.2 to 5.2 billion dollars behind. It's like literally Albertans could go and vote on October 19th for this referendum. And if enough of us vote, like if we get an overwhelming majority, like I'd love to see happen, we could declare independence like pretty shortly thereafter. Like these negotiations aren't going to drag on for years like some people are saying. It's going to be like, here's what we want. Here's what we want. Okay, if you're offering us something that's so stupid that you're just dragging your feet, we're going to declare independence. All that the law says is that we have to negotiate in good faith. So as soon as one side isn't negotiating good faith, then it's like, okay. And also think about it. If the end game is independence either way, it's not like we have to keep playing by the rules that Ottawa sets on us. Like I want to be fair, you know? But if Ottawa is not setting, if they're not negotiating good faith, I lose all interest. You know, okay, we're going to declare independence and then we'll take 15 years to negotiate some of these little things. Fine. But the end game is going to be independence, and I think it's going to happen quicker. And so we could literally go from a deficit of a couple $2 billion, and really we don't even need to declare independence right away. We just need to have say, okay, look, we're actually going to stop sending you taxes like day one. Okay, day one, we stop sending it in. We're going to start collecting all of ours. You're not paying to Revenue Canada, you're paying to Revenue Alberta. And we can build up that pile of money and then say, look, this is potentially what we're going to pay you, but we're going to negotiate everything out before we give you a penny. That might motivate them to negotiate in good faith a little bit better. Like, you can't be a pushover in something like this. Like, they're not going to play nice with us. We can't play nice with them. Economic impact of the massive external investment in what would be one of the lowest taxed, least regulated economies in the world can hardly be overstated. The economic activity gained by recovering the $500 billion in investment lost due to Canadian federal government regulations and taxation would add substantially to this fiscal position. So, government regulations, right? Like you think about the Trans Mountain whatever pipeline that they built. It's supposed to be like a couple $1 billion, $5 or $6 billion. Went to like 30, I think, or like $25 billion over debt or over budget. That's all because you had to have an environmental consultation with an Indigenous consultation, and then they each had their environmental consultations with their own Indigenous consultations, and then they had like a gender study consultation, and then it was layered on with like, you know, it's like they just keep adding more things, and all these people are getting paid, and what are they really contributing to the whole process? So, you know, we cut government regulations. We're going to do that. There is such, even people who don't support Alberta independence, who are still like conservative minded, they want to cut government regulations. And so the only way this is actually going to happen is with independence. If you don't support independence, but you're still saying, I want to cut all these government regulations, keep trying what you've been trying for the last 100 years. You know, maybe if we vote hard enough, then we'll get we'll get some change, you know. It's not going to happen. The system is working the way it's designed. The Frontier Centre for Public Policy also identifies that gaining international markets for Alberta oil and gas would add an additional $26.5 billion to the fiscal position. So you know, I think pretty quickly we would get a pipeline projected through Oregon or something like that. And then probably get one built down to Texas again, like another, like the Keystone might get fired up or something. And we just completely bypass Canada. Like, wouldn't that, that's kind of where I'm at with my mind. Like, they don't want to be nice to us. Okay, fine. You just get cut out of the whole deal. The United States wants it. Implications for an independent Alberta. Fiscal capacity. While it's not desirable to continue taxation at current levels in an independent Alberta, the preference being to provide tax reductions to Alberta citizens. This analysis show a very strong fiscal capacity with $29.4 to $48.3 billion surplus, or $3.6 to $45 billion with setup costs. 3.6? Did I miss something here? I think it was 26.3. Okay, I think so. This might be a typo. Okay. Which optionally allows significant investment in infrastructure, $2.5 billion currently, healthcare, education, $2.6 billion, or economic diversification. Like, yeah, we can do things. And like the problem we're going to have as Albertans once we are free of Ottawa is going to be like, what do we want more? Do you want to build 16 new hospitals, right? Or do you want to build, 8 hospitals and like 8 more schools or something? Like, what a problem to have, And that's why we want independence so bad, because we just see how hard we're working and how much productivity we could have and how much more productivity we could have. And we want to be prosperous. And we tried for so long to just say to Canada, hey, we're willing to work hard and we're willing to share all of this with you. But instead they just take as much as they want and then they just like leave us with nothing. Like Alberta's running a deficit, and I blame obviously our government is wasting money. The provincial government's wasting money, right? But like with all the billions that go to Ottawa and the pittance that we get back, it should be incredibly easy to balance the budget in Alberta. And it would be under a republic. Tax reductions for Albertans. A very strong contender for the projected surplus is direct tax reductions. Using the low end of the financial capacity, $29 billion, and applying it to selected tax reductions, you can see it is possible in the new Alberta to eliminate the federal GST, as well as eliminate the current provincial personal income taxes and corporate income taxes. So, eliminate all taxes. All right, let's continue on. Well, I mean, we can't just go off of resource revenue. I would be opposed to that. Okay. I think, I don't know. Okay, if the high end of the financial capacity, $47 billion, is applied to the selected tax reduction, it is within the range of possibility, considering the variability in the numbers, to eliminate all the current federal. Okay, so the federal portion. So you'd still pay your provincial portion. I see what they're saying there. Sorry, guys, it's late in the day. Come on. Federal, personal, and corporate income taxes. I get it. Okay. This still allows the new Alberta government to have a balanced budget, especially with the assumption that there would be a drive to streamline and drive to increase government efficiency, eliminating waste and optimizing its services as an independent nation. What candy to my ears, This is what we Albertans have wanted for so long. We keep voting conservative. Oh yeah, fiscal responsibility, cut the waste, optimize our services. We can have this. We could literally have this in like 8 months. This analysis does not seek to rethink the taxation approaches, but even cursory examination shows that an independent Alberta could very easily pursue a wide range of tax reductions, including flat tax rate for personal income tax and corporate income tax on the order of 10%, alongside a Alberta sales tax, consumption tax similar to the current GST, potentially with rates lower than 5%. So a couple of comments here, right? If we had the lowest, or we're tied with the lowest tax rate for corporations, we would probably attract international businesses. Like, that's the quickest way we could diversify our economy. And I think it's really wise for us to start thinking about that, right? Because, oil and gas is kind of like a good thing to get your economy, to get wealthy with. But then you need to diversify out. And so imagine we could attract, manufacturing and AI and, other industries basically would come here. Businesses will go wherever the lowest tax rates are. And if we even wrote in our constitution that you can't increase taxes without like a majority, vote, businesses would see that signal as, yeah, this is a good place. We can go here. They got a 10-year plan. They're locked in at this tax rate. They'll make their budgets and predict this. And then, and so that's good. That's the Alberta advantage, like low taxes. Now, as far as a sales tax goes, I want to hear what your opinions are on it, but my thoughts are, okay, it is actually a fair way to tax, because in a sense, you don't have to pay it, right? You don't have to go and buy things. And I mean, there's no sales tax on the necessity goods already, like food and stuff like that. So it's only on other things that you buy. And so essentially it's like, if you can't afford to buy the thing, then you can afford to pay the tax. So I kind of get that argument. Although we'll see if Albertans have an appetite for a sales tax. If it came with like a massive reduction, because like all the federal taxes are cut out, I could see that Albertans would be okay with that. And then if it was like locked into the Constitution that you can't increase it for a period of time or something like that, okay, that's probably how you'd sell that. How much more of this do I want to read? Okay. So I'm just going to skim through this because this is basically just the potential reduction in taxes. So they're showing the current federal 35,000 proposed, and then the reduction. Okay, so get to zero. So they're proposing lowering federal personal income tax, lowering federal corporate tax. They're proposing keeping the sales tax. They're proposing getting rid of the excise taxes, so that's like your fuel and your cigarette taxes. They're proposing increasing your benefits to CPP and decreasing your like APP, your pension, and decreasing the amount that you pay into it. Okay, this is a federal portion. I'm sorry, guys. And then they're proposing keeping the provincial taxes exactly as they are, getting rid of property taxes and other taxes. And this is the low case. So that leaves us with an average tax cut is $11,000 per person. So that's a 29% tax reduction. And the high case, it's like they're saying this is the worst. This is like the low case of tax reduction, what we could expect. In the high case, you can see the numbers here. I guess they're leaving the federal taxes exactly as they are. They're getting rid of the GST, the excise, and the EI CPP. And then they're leaving in all the provincial and the corporate. So they're basically leaving our tax almost the same as they are. They're just getting rid of GST basically and excise. And I mean, this is a pretty fair, like this is like, we're not really changing all that much. Oh no, sorry, I'm reading this wrong. Reduction. Okay, so then the high rate would be, okay, I see what we're doing here. So 17 billion would be the high and 11 would be, okay, so I mean, do you want an $11,000 to $17,000 cut to your taxes? Because that's what the Alberta Prosperity Project's proposing right here. Debt management, Alberta's $70.4 billion debt could be reduced rapidly with a surplus lowering interest costs, APP advantage. Surplus could lower pension contribution rates, or enhanced benefits. Risks economic volatility. So a lot of this is depending on our resource revenue, which I'm unsure is a wise thing to do. I would like to move away from that, where our resource revenue just goes into a sovereign wealth fund, and then we collect the interest down the road in 20 years. Supply costs may require short-term debt if not amortized. Currency considerations. Following its independence from Canada and declaration of sovereignty, Alberta introduces the Alberta dollar. Maybe we got to think of a new name. Maybe keep the dollar. All right. As its national currency to cement its economic independence. To facilitate a seamless transition, Alberta temporarily adopts the US dollar, capitalizing on its global stability while developing the ABD's framework. Okay, so using the US dollar temporarily is actually a pretty wise move, because once we declare independence from Canada, the Canadian dollar is going to go down. And who wants to go for that ride? The ABD would partially be backed by newly established gold, Bitcoin, oil reserves, gold for its international recognition and store of value, a strategic Bitcoin allocation to embrace decentralized finance, and a newly established strategic oil reserve leveraging the province's vast oil wealth. So like our currency would be super stable. Like it would be a really desirable. We'd probably see other countries wanting to save money in Alberta dollars because it would be that stable, protected from inflation, protected from things like that. This oil reserve, securely stored and transparently managed, bolsters the currency's credibility by tying it to Alberta's dominant energy sector. Together, this tripartite backing of gold, Bitcoin, oil positions Alberta dollar as a stable and innovative currency, reinforcing Alberta's economic resilience and global financial standing. Swap and credit line discussions. An independent Alberta seeking to secure swap lines and a line of credit with the United States in US dollars would need to leverage its economic strengths and strategic importance to negotiate favorable terms. Alberta could approach the U.S. Federal Reserve and major financial institutions, emphasizing its robust energy sector, with supplies significant oil and gas to the U.S., ensuring mutual economic benefits. By demonstrating fiscal discipline, a stable regulatory environment, and a commitment to free trade, Alberta could build confidence in its creditworthiness. Swap lines could be established through bilateral agreements, allowing Alberta access to U.S. dollar liquidity during short-term revenue shortfalls, while a line of credit can be secured through U.S. banks or international financial institutions backed by Alberta's resource revenues. Sounds good to me, honestly. Like, we want to do business with the United States, and they want to do business with us, so let's just open up the doors. Let's have like free trade, and let's do it. These mechanisms would facilitate seamless trade, stabilize Alberta's economy against commodity price volatility, and provide a buffer for unlikely but unforeseen fiscal challenges, ensuring economic resilience as a new nation. Appropriate reserves need to be established to pay all existing government debt and contingent liabilities. Okay, so that's where I'm going to end this video today. It went a little bit longer than I wanted it to. Please let me know what you think. Am I just running my mouth on some of this stuff, or did I make any good points at all? Please leave your comments below. Thank you for watching. Cheers.